So, okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah, does it work? Yes, no? Ah, yes, perfect, thank you very much. So again, now I'm gonna share with you a few of my, let's say, observings from the last few years. As far as some particular, let's say, environmentalist, particular biologist, particular something, okay, I'm interested in history of science too. I found to quite interesting to share with you one of, let's say, the big story, which is quite popular in the recent scientific world, which is called Anthropocene. Hopefully some of you already heard something of that. Why it could be helpful for us. The reason why I decided to choose this topic is that the story about climate change is somehow part of the story about Anthropocene. And why I try to show you during this introduction why it's like that, and because I'm particularly interested in philosophy too, try to challenge a bit the story with this guy. Probably some of you know him. He was maybe one of the most important person in Western philosophy, and his very well-known student Plato told that this guy say something, do something like corrupt young and preach new gods. What it means that he tried to challenge their recent imaginations about the world, about sense of their lives. So I'm trying to challenge a bit all the story about climate change through the story about Anthropocene. So hopefully it will be quite interesting for you. I don't know how much time it takes. What I definitely want to share with you the most, it's the core story of Anthropocene and maybe some reflection on it too. Then I start the story itself. I would like to let's say outline the wider let's say frame when I'm gonna move right now. First, as difference between proximate and ultimate goals. This is a quite important evolutionary thing. Evolutionists think about, let's say, motivation or goals in the nature of in the story of interpretation of what's going on in human history and biological history in those two different lines. All of us are following, or we are following our proximate goals. Means we are doing our daily choices, and no one really knows how our life will end because we don't know what's going to happen on the next crossroad. We don't know what we will need in 1 year, for example, and we don't know what decision we will do in 1 year ago. So that's why we don't know how our story of our life will end. But if we look, for example, on the evolution history, we can already speak about something what we can ultimate goals. Means how all the story end up with, I don't know, extinction of dinosaurs, for example. They definitely doesn't expect that something like that happened. And those two different frames leads to completely different understanding of what we should do or how we should understand of the history of nature. You will see it on the story of Anthropocene. It's somehow connected with the ways how we deal with environmental problems. There are two, let's say, realms too. One is the domain of phenomena. That's the world we live in, again, everyday world. When we search for something like the sense of our personal life, to do something would make sense to us, but it would make sense to us is not necessarily the same thing what makes sense in this wider domain. That means domain, let's say science or measurement or anything, where we search for objective explanation of what's going to happen. And between those two realms are very usually huge gaps. And one hand, or I don't know, in our personal life, we can, let's say, experience the climate change is something what is really terrifying and threatening. But in the wider point of view and a wider perspective, we can see it as a, just one event in the huge history of the Earth. And it's quite different sometimes to put those two pictures together. So this, let's say, dichotomy leads to different dealing with environmental, let's say, behavior too. There are some, let's say, strategies of personal responsibility, like, I don't know, recirculation and I don't know, saving water and stuff like that. And something what we call like a knowledge necessity. We have to just accept that, for example, natural populations sometimes decline, sometimes rise, and we can do nothing with it. And there are, like, let's say, natural constraints of the planet Earth, which are simply something what we have to accept it with no doubts. Story about Anthropocene. What is it? If you want to know, or if you want to ask yourself what's like common understanding of a topic, maybe some teachers don't really like that, but you can check Wikipedia just to know what, like, widely or generally people think about something. So, and if you check Wikipedia, you can read the definition like that. The Anthropocene defines Earth's most recent geologic time period as being human influence or anthropogenic, based on overwhelming global evidence that atmospheric, geologic, hydrologic, biosphere, and other Earth system processes are now altered by humans. And that's the core, are altered by humans. So, when I start all the story, let me introduce one important feature of Anthropocene. And what is it? Besides the quite commonly known things like this is a new term for recent geological time, maybe is not widely accepted yet, as definitely term for age of dominion of human. It's somehow a result of self-awareness of human species in the age of globalization. Something happened, something has happened. We realize ourselves differently. We are not anymore living in, let's say, just in a particular small space like village. We are now somehow Earth citizens. It's a new situation for us. But the thing I wanna point out the most is that the Anthropocene is something like a new paradigm. I guess all of you know something what paradigm means. It came from Old Greek word, which means it's like say model or something what we can use to for interpretation of similar cases of situation to, or like let's say, story of or understanding of the world or anything. So example of paradigm could be, I don't know, Darwin theory. Between Darwin, we have to put all the phenomena or experiences into the story, let's say, of Bible, or a story of all Greek philosophers, was a mixture of all of them. After Darwin, we have to, let's say, hang on all phenomena on the axis of the time axis of evolution. There is no any, let's say, acceptable interpretation of how nature came. I mean, or how nature how nature evolved. I mean, in at least in natural sciences. All right. So, and the point is, and it's typical that we have still the same empirical evidences, but we put them in different contexts. Yeah, there are still the same animals, but before it, they were created by God. Now they are products of evolution. Still the same animals. It's a very similar situation with all phenomena in touch with Anthropocene or in touch with climate change. So, as each paradigm, it tends to include and identify all recent phenomena by means of Anthropocene. You can notice the last 10 years how so much human activities is suddenly interpreted as let's say evident features or traits of Anthropocene epoch. The point is that if we live in some particular period of time, it's better say that that we are like stuck with it. Usually people think that they have a paradigm, that they believe something, they have some belief, but in fact, usually paradigm has all people in a certain time. So we are living in it, and it's extremely difficult to understand the world differently in a certain time. So finally, we both creating Anthropocene or paradigm and observing it in the same time. That's quite tricky thing. So that's how paradigm usually works. So finally, maybe we are owned by Anthropocene. Okay. Just a few last preliminary notes between I start the story about origination of Anthropocene epoch. The question is, what forced us to think in this way? I mean, in Anthropocene way. Maybe this term or this paradigm is somehow a result of definitely paradigm shift of human self-understanding from a regional level, nation, race, state, to global village. As I told it already, it's completely different story. We are no longer living in our old tribe or in our village. We already know, all horizons were finally joined in one huge horizon called Earth shape. We all know that we are Earth citizens. That's, psychologically, it's completely new situation than 5 or 6 generations before for most of people, because of education and so on. What else? Scientific, economic, and technological development in 20th century change our lives a lot. In 18th century, in this country, 18th century, beginning of 18th century, there was more than 90% of people working in agriculture. In the beginning of 20th century, it was like 43% people working in agriculture. Now, in this country, there is 0.3% of people working in agriculture. So it completely changed. We change completely our way of life. So, and it brings all these consequences. Another one, maybe input or force, was the shift from destructive potential for nuclear power. There is no place to escape anymore, because there is, I don't know, potential of nuclear weapons is like 60 times destroy all the world or something like that. It's a terrible number simply. So, well, there is no place to escape. Shock from global cacophony. What it means that in traditional society, there was no many people who have a voice, who can really speak. In a recent situation, look at Facebook, all this huge the communication possibilities. It's a different situation. Now, there is too many voices. And with too many voices, you can realize how many people really is in the world. Look at number of friends in your Facebook, okay? Population growth, definitely. there's lots of thinkers and scientists are convinced that population growth is the most important force in Anthropocene. I'll mention later. And shock from environmental crisis definitely, and simply just worry for overall. Okay, those two people was first who, let's say, rise this term. I mean, Anthropocene. The first one is atmospheric chemist, I think, and he was first who told that human, by their activities, are changing the composition of atmosphere, which is something what in geological times just natural forcings did. So it looks like we're starting to be natural forcing. And the second one, he did something with algae, and he, I would say, observed the same temporally somewhere in the 90s. But until like 2010, it was not very like widely discussed. But after that, I started with few articles in Nature journal, one of the most famous scientific journal, and from this time it's a very common topic, and you can see it everywhere. It's not just, you know, it's not just team for not just let's say topic for scientists, or I don't know, chemists or geologists, but for humanities thinkers too, or for designers. You can now find journals called Anthropocene, as you can see. So it's really a very wide story, and suck in it and swallow lots and lots of different disciplines, not just science. So that's why it really looks like we are living in the new age, in a new paradigm called Anthropocene. Just one small physical explanation, or let's say model from the scientific world, and then I start with the story of Anthropocene. It's about carbon cycle. There are two huge reservoirs of let's say our Earth system, atmosphere, continents, let's say, the Earth and oceans. When the particles or elements are like floating through, are exchanging between those three huge reservoirs. And the point is that we, at least in terms of carbon, change it. We put a lot of carbon in different ways, in different, let's say, trails in it. So now, please, then I start the story itself. Please put in your browser this link. It would be better to see it by yourself than stream it to this application. Yeah, it's there. Okay. And this is a very short trailer of new film called Anthropocene, which is right about this topic, and I think it's a good introduction in it. And you will see it's a little bit catastrophic, but I'll try to change it a bit. So please start it now, and after you watch it, how we continue. Okay, so can I go on? Okay, I hope most of you saw it. Quite scary, isn't it? Especially the scene when Ivor is burning. It's somehow iconic situation in terms of how much we reduce biodiversity and the reason for them. But okay, go on. I'll try to make the wider scene as I promised. So, okay, we're gonna speak about Anthropocene, but when it all started, you know, especially geologists really like dating. So we know that Alpha and Omega hold a story as the dominance of the human, but when it starts? So is there a clear moment in the history, or it's a long process of like becoming Anthropocene? To determine the beginning of the new geological era, especially geologists really need some really hard evidence. Particularly geologists really love the huge extinctions. If like 90% of all animals disappear from the surface of the earth, they're really happy because it's really, you know, hard evidence. So hopefully we are still far off this moment, despite we started really quickly. I mean, erase the biodiversity from the earth. But if we are living in the six mass extinction, we are at the beginning, but it will be another story. So how to determine? There are two possibilities how to describe our epoch and how to recognize or make make all this, you know, beginnings or determine beginnings. One is the search for milestones and looking for a particular moment in history where we can say, okay, now we already overwhelmed the earth, overwhelmed the nature, and we can start speaking of Anthropocene, the age of the humankind, or tell it as a long story. So I decided to tell you the long, not that long, don't worry, story composed of some milestones of local or global events and combine. In some cases, yeah, it's possible to define beginning precisely. In others, it spans over a longer period. But what I'm gonna say, the story is about, you know, rising or emerging of the humans from, let's say, natural background as a dominant species in the world. Sometimes there are really very nice, very sharp evidence. Like in this case, somewhere in the Czech Republic, but you can see around the world. There's a moment where you can make it like there's a hole, big hole in the soil, and you can notice which particular. I'll show you. Where is it? Here, over here. Okay, it's right here. Hopefully you can see the point right here. Anthropocene begin in this area, because up of this line you can see those like argillaceous layers, which has been flushed as sediment after deforestation by humans. Before it there was a peat, but it's not that clear always, you know. So I'm gonna introduce you 6 or in fact 5 possible milestones that you will see how our power would groove or raised up in the history. I just jumped over the 5th one, which is Trinity test in '95, which is the first atmospheric nuclear test when we realized the power of nuclear power. But I already told. So first milestone. Let's start begin. Some scientists think that the Anthropocene is the same period of time as Holocene. Maybe you know this. The Quaternary, the last geological era, is divided. The last 2 parts are like Pleistocene, it's Ice Age, and Holocene is age we are living in right now. The last, let's say, 12,000 years, and right about plus minus 12,000 years ago, humans finally conquered the rest of the world, means America continents. And from this time, you can see the start of remarkable change in nature. The most remarkable consequence of this conquest was extinction of what we call megafauna, or simply the big grazers. Whenever a human appear, those big, not just grazers, but all big animals just disappeared. Why? It's a really nice piece of meat, you know. It's easier to get, you know, mammoth or a big deer or something than, you know, hunt rabbits. It's really small. So, but it was very important because Pleistocene land has been not as like what covered with a huge like forest density. It was more like I'll show it. It's more like dead. Okay, it's a sort of green Africa savanna. It was like at least a huge parts of America looks like, and huge parts of Europe too. We can know it by like pollen analysis from the geological recordings. But when a human came to America, especially, that was very well described there. All these big grazers appeared, and land became overgrown with forest again because of those big grazers, not just because of rising humidity and temperature and so on. And as we, you know, the story was that after Ice Age, there was a huge, very climate change in recent, really exclusive form, when lots of biological form can develop. But it looks like, because there is no other good reason for global extinction of those big grazers than the humans just erase them. It looks like we cause somehow, or at least we contribute much, the climate change, or the change from the last ice age, last geological times, to return one, because we kill the big grazers and big animals. It's a quite important thing. I believe it is, because you know, and now is the first moment when I can remain again at this difference between proximate and ultimate goals. I'm pretty sure that the hunters and gatherers don't want to change the climate. They just want a quite nice piece of meat. So the proximate goals was to get the food. But the ultimate result of the effort, of their life simply, was that they caused finally the change in the land cover. And this change in land cover most probably led to a huge atmospheric and natural change. There can be question arising why African animals hasn't been that much affected by it, and the answer is because of long presence of human, and because in Africa a lot of diseases evolved to reduce human population. So that's why we can see like a huge, let's say, extinction in Africa till recent time, fortunately. This graph, however, it could look like complicated. It's not really complicated. What it shows? It shows disappearing of big grazers and the big animals when people came, or let's say reasons for disappearing. Here you can see causes of extinction. If red color is contained in the animal picture, it was caused by humans. If blue, it's caused by climate, and in case of brown, we have no sufficient data for that. We can see the number of animals which extinct. We can see the date, like 30,000 years ago, and so on and so on, where human appeared. And always, here you can see human appeared, especially in America. It's a very evident. When humans appeared, those all animals, big animals, disappeared. You can see third of them disappeared, and most of them caused by humans. So really, there is no any reasonable explanation for the disappearing of huge grazers. And why is it important? That's simply that's simple. Because we change the climate by it. Okay, that's some evidence. I can jump it. But so finally, what's the reason? What's the result? That's Pleistocene. Land could looks like. That's after it. So what we cause is now quite evident, I believe. Alternative milestone 2, possible milestone, and rising on Anthropocene. It's what we call Neolithic revolution. So let's say becoming the sort of like I don't know, stewards of the landscape or something like that. But most important thing with it was that we again change the ratio between forest and cleaning back to the cleaning was bigger. Disappearance of big grazers led to change in forest cleaning ratio and type of biotope connectivity. But during Neolithic revolution, human slowly started to reverse this ratio back. So before, after extinction, it looks like on the picture on the left. Okay, there were some clearings without forest, but after extinction, most of landscape has been covered by forests. After Neolithic revolution, this ratio swapped back. All right, and it looks like, you know, forest is not really like a natural biotope on many places around the world, or was not before a human revolution, and is not again. What we use for it? Fire management. What big grazers did before human came, for example, in America, now human did by fire. So result was quite similar. Just, you know, tool was a little bit different. And the strategy, I mean, burning, it's very old, very old. Aborigines burn the bush. They call it outback. They burn it like 40,000 years ago already to you know, chasing the animals by fire, and to get some new room for crocodiles. But from a global ecosystem point of view, different methods, I mean fire, or bushfire, or forest fire method, but the effect was similar to big grazers in Pleistocene. So what it means is that we already changed just till, let's say, beginning or till Neolithic era, at least land cover, but maybe climate too, twice by big grazers and then by fire. All right. So what's the consequence of Neolithic revolution? Some biologists recognize like new kind of, let's say, biomes or ecosystem goes anthropes, like anthropogenic biomes or human biomes. What is it? It's an artificially constructed biome, sort of environment, or niches as consequence of human activity. Typical is then settlement, urban and mixed settlement, villages, croplands, rangelands, and semi-natural lands. Two scientists, Alice and Ramankuti, changing a bit, recognize like 4 main periods of rising or emerging anthropes. The ancient one when hunters and gatherers fight with nature plus minus 50-50, you know, they digress something after that, something like diseases or wars or something, just erase them. So nature grabbed their land back. So it was like that. In agriculture period, which began approximately, and that's different all around the world. Okay, don't see a round number. Anthropes were made up of mostly wild or, let's say, untouched land, transferred to fields and pastures. In something what we call big medieval change, but it is mostly linked with Europe. Most of us are Europeans. And it's quite. I hope it's quite relevant. Was in, let's say, during second century after so after Christ, and in Europe when the 20th to 30th century of seed. And the last step in it's really like, you know, you can imagine it as steps in growing like some kind of software or application, like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, you know, where each other step is like remarkable change. And the last one was Industrial Revolution, development of very intensive agriculture and industrial and dense settled lands. The second step looks like that. It's that's quite famous painting from one very famous Czech painter who tried to, you know, imagine somehow this situation of some like ancient era of humankind. And this one is interesting in few like traits. You can only see the people who already have like domesticated animals. Over here, they already domesticated wolves. They have kind of buildings. They have a fire, but maybe notice especially this part of the picture. All this picture looks very like organic. We call it like extensive. It was not, let's say, well organized yet, so it was really extended. But and the third alternative milestone, we call big medieval change, something basically or human pressure on the land jump on it like another level. Why? We introduced the effective method of land use and landscape organization. We really systemize the land use. We developed, let's say, something what we call geometric land. Before it was organic, as I saw it. Now it was very precise. Big medieval change is somehow connected with population growth. First, like really a remarkable population growth and political changes, and finally more effective control of tax collection. That's the difference. Can you see? Watch at that, and now at that. That's the difference. It's incomparably more effective, let's say, pressure on the landscape. We are starting to use each small part. So something like wild nature is still like more remote and far off, and we are able to use very effectively still bigger and bigger part of lands, which finally means the changes and structure of biota too. Don't want to bother with lots of graph, but here you can see just one important thing as a structure or composition of pollen, grain, and the soil layer. We can use this method to identify how the vegetation structure was in the past. So, and if you check it, and this is in Middle Europe, in one area in Middle Europe, you can see quite evidently that in prehistoric cultural landscape, something like woodland or managed or affected woodland dominate. when when let's say Roman Empire end, and when Celtic settlement disappeared too, you can see the huge rise of woodland, which is typical environment here. And after let's say this medieval change, you can see disappearing woodlands again and starting like crop fields and fallow and meadow and stuff like that. All right, so this is just another evidences of like growing of human influence on the surface of the world. One small intermezzo, which is in my opinion quite interesting and important. Years ago, there was published quite influential article in Nature Journal about the settlement and the agriculture activity in the South America and Amazon basin area, about let's say agricultural activity of Native Americans before the conquest. It was very interesting article, which shows that Amazonia is usually what it shows in our myth. I mean, Western myth. Amazonia is usually described as untouched or untouched paradise, which was brutally or is brutally plundered in recent time. But according to this article, before European conquest, it was intensively used already. Indigenous cultures massively grew manioc, sweet potato, maize, variety of pumpkins, and so on, which requires very intensive irrigation. Even it was in the rainforest, the areas were quite big. We can find them, or archaeologists found there quite highly developed irrigation infrastructure. They fertilized, they filled by transfer of soil from the lower areas nearby rivers and by ash. Where they get the ash, they burn trees, obviously. And they already found a cyclic fire management there, so which keep fields free of trees and making new fields and ash for fertilization. How we can know it? In the area, in the Amazonian area, you can find something what they call terra preta, which is the rest of cultivated soils discovered in deep forest as archaeological sites. So, what it means? Even if you check the structure of forest, I mean trees, the structure was changed in favor of human needs recently. There is like still 5 to 6 times a higher presence of trees which produce edible fruits more than in other forests. So just 2 images to it. In these 2 pictures, you can see that harvest is not really something which has been grown on, let's say, like natural soil type, means with nature, okay, soil type which is usually presented there without any human activity or impact. On the right side here, you can see the terra preta, which is the soil which has been brought from the area nearby river or nearby river up or somewhere when they need it. And you can see on the right side, you can see the rest of settlement, a rest of area which has been used for irrigation. And this is the map of, let's say, areas which has been changed, but high predominance of edible fruit trees has been noticed. So you can see it could be like tens of percent maybe. So we really speak about Amazonia. What does it mean? It means that Amazonia agricultural civilization began, like let's say 3,000 years before present, and suddenly disappeared in the 16th century because all those wonderful diseases we brought there. Yeah, it massively collapsed. Of Amazonia agricultural civilization is evident even in poor ice record. Let's say the composition of the air in the history we observe from records or from the bubbles from the air, which is jail in bubbles in the pore ice or in pore ice, and even there we can record it with like evident let's say lowering of content of CO2 in atmosphere and methane too. So what it means? What it means? It means that even indigenous culture, those indigenous, wonderful, native Indians, have changed their environment really strongly. It means the base changes of natural environment are not just product of Western civilization. That's quite a new interpretation of it. That's change of paradigm. Even Amazonian forest was deeply influenced by him. So finally, there is no continent, okay, maybe Antarctica, with untouched, something like untouched nature. So history of Holocene or Anthropocene is all about deep interconnection or struggle between the humans and nature all around the world. So suddenly the story is starting to be a bit different. Everything, the humans are co-constructors of the nature's whole history, at least the Holocene. So, but there is one, in my opinion, it's the hope. It's wonderful hope that if we can see how quickly can Amazonia forest, let's say, recover after disappearing of Native Americans before Columbus came in America. It means that nature recovery forces are stronger than we accepted. So it's a small hope or something, but brings me quite nice hope. Now we are reaching the most popular or let's say widely accepted point or milestone where Anthropocene started, and even let's say inventors of this term, I mean Anthropocene, Crutzen and Stormer, I mentioned it in the beginning, consider that this is beginning of Anthropocene because of a massive emission of CO2 from the industrial activity. Okay, so it's somehow associated with discovery, or let's say application, better saying application of James Watt's steam engine. So there is a lot of activities and inventions or anything what can be found between, let's say, 16th to 18th, 19th century. Steam engine will enable us, especially to use bigger cloth. So we can plug in deeper and reaching nutrients which have been stored in deeper layers of the soil, which brings obviously the higher harvest. We were plugging prairie with the distribution of new species and sorts of plants contribute to rise of human population too, especially potatoes and maize. Later on, the discovery of synthetic fertilizers was really like a real revolution. Something what we called Haber-Bosch process allow us, simply saying, to milk the nitrogen from the atmosphere. So we don't need like just natural fertilizers. Now we can use the atmosphere nitrogen to fertilize our fields. As real revolution. And all this together with the growing of large, well-organized farms, sort of pre-intensive agriculture, using the steam engine devices helps us to get more and more power. So most of people like linked the steam engine with industry, with, I don't know, railway or something. But it was very important in agriculture too, for all those reasons I already mentioned. So it really brings us the new power, more energy, more food, more is crucial for it. Okay, and maybe this picture could be like symbol of all the stuff. It's Lionel Walden driving dogs in Cardiff. In Cardiff, it was a place where we started the mining coal from the earth in a really like massive amount. But for it, you need a lot of water. For pumping water into the ground, you can use steam engine. So you know it's a loop somehow. All right. So, and the last one, last and maybe the most important for us before the break, please be brave for a few more minutes. The last alternative milestone, it's the one what is usually considered as the one we'll be looking for, and it's called Great Acceleration. What's up? It's the period after World War II, beginning, let's say, in the 50s, which is typical with the huge innovation in technology, whether socioeconomic and earth system trends have been increasing dramatically, and probably in the 50s. And that point, in the 50s, human moved more material over the planet than all rivers do. So that's maybe the best evidence that the humans arise as geological force. Doesn't matter, you know, thinking in, let's say, yeah, scientific way. Doesn't matter who or what change the face of the earth. Important is just describe the proper forcing. And from the 50s, are really changing a lot. Maybe, okay, you saw the small scenes and trailer of Anthropocene documentary film. That's it. We are changing the face of the earth from 50s a lot more than all huge rivers. So what's typical for the recent time is the end of Neolithic somehow. So something like new nature or second nature arrived, or new one wilderness. As it's a kind of nature which is rising after complete land cover change by humans. Small crop fields were united to huge and intensive industrial farms. What it means? It means another step from medieval change, where you can see the stripes of the field behind each house. Now it's a huge areas, which are unpenetrable for most of animals. And finally, it stopped the evolution, but it will be a different story. People disappear from the country. We are not living in the country anymore because we are not working in agriculture. There's 0.3% of people working in agriculture in this country, and it was 34% in the beginning of last century. So we disappear from the landscape completely, and we don't know, honestly, we don't know what to do with the air or with our land. Massive urbanization. And finally, it was a very typical, it's a global pandemic of everything. So if you, I don't know, buy bananas in the supermarket, you can find gecko from South America, or you can find whatever plants from Asia nearby, a river here over my window in the park. So it's pandemic of everything, of thoughts, animals, of plants, of people, of everything. That's completely new situation because we cross the biogeographic borders. We are able to mix thoughts and biota, which is not been simply possible before. So, and before the break, that's the most famous picture in Dutch with Anthropocene. The set of graphs shows how everything's jump up somewhere in, okay, let's say 50s here, 20th century, definitely. Everything you can see, world population usually is considered as most important driver, but well, all those things somehow play a role in it. Like real GDP, foreign and direct investment, primary energy, water use, everything. So this could be really called Anthropocene. Finally, oversend, maybe that's what guys from Prague, from the group of, let's say, Anthropocene group who are trying to deal with this phenomenon, thought as that our recent phenomena finally are probably just consequences of overpopulation and overconsumption. Why? Because many of technologies, like I don't know, access or animal breeding and agriculture and so on and so on, has been observed a long time ago. But with if you have very much people, you need more sources, and everything is sound perfectly. Okay, I think guys, it's quite difficult to have a lesson in this environment, because I don't know if you are already too tired of, or if you are able to accept something yet. But anyway, I'm speaking already exactly 1 hour. So have a coffee, have a break, let's say 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And after that, I'm wrap it up and conclude it somehow. All right, so we will meet in, let's say, 11:50, what? 5, okay, 8 minutes. Thank you. Okay, hello, I'm back again. Hopefully you take a breath. The biggest disadvantage of this way of lecturing is that there is no one who would like throw something over me to tell, man, you are speaking too quickly, or it's already too boring, you should really change the topic or something. So I believe that someone like probably Jirka, or I don't know, Jarda, Jakob, or anyone from students, if there is something that is really uncomfortable for you, just please tell it. Don't write it in the chat because it's too quick for me. I have two monitors here and I'm not able to notice all this stuff. Okay, but okay, I'll try to speak a little bit slowly and try to like wrap it up already somehow. Okay, back to track, please. So now we ended up with this picture. Can you see the presentation, please? Anyone? No. Okay, I'll try it again. What about now? It is better now? You see my camera. You still see my camera? Oh, okay, I'll try it again. Okay. What about now? It's better now? Can you see it? Can you see the presentation now, please? Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So, okay, let me continue now. Now, yeah. Now would be okay. Hopefully, you see. Okay. So, I'll wrap it up a bit. In this Anthropocene period, or in this in the recent situation, lots of like the natural states or natural components, and let's say architecture for ecosystem and so on and so on, and let's say relations between animals and other part of the world has been somehow changed. It's almost kind of like distortion, or I don't know, deviation. And I've heard a very nice lesson of one professor of zoology from our faculty a few years ago, who is ornithologist basically, and he showed the big change in, let's say, the places which are inhabited by biota animals and plants. This is, in my opinion, from biological point of view, very interesting contribution to the recent situation. And this contribution came up with the situation in the cities, because he told, again, he's ornithologist, so, and there is a project in Czech Republic where they count the bird species and the number of bird species in the cities. We have around 300 plus minus bird species in Czech Republic. And what they noticed was very interesting. Then in the second biggest city, okay, largest city area in Brno, is the second largest city in this country. There was 130 evidence of different species. That's a lot. Why? He told that cities begin to be the new biodiversity hotspot somehow. Why? Again, crop fields are just biological deserts. Forests mostly spruce forests in this country are biological deserts too. Somehow there is a very, very low biodiversity, and now spruce are dying wastely because of as more beetless spruce, something, forget it, doesn't matter. So finally, and urban areas starting to be only the place to live, and it's very diverse. There is lots of kind of environment, lots of kind of, let's say, niches. It's quite safe. People don't eat animals in the city usually, mostly. Okay, so and you can get lots of extra energy in it, extra nutrients. So like new, let's say, food nets are developing right now in the cities area. So there are higher temperature, obviously, higher precipitation because of dust, which composes the core of drops, and finally higher biodiversity, high diversity of birds. Here is you can see there's like 130 birds in Brno. So cities starting to be like sort of very nice biotop. It's completely different situation, isn't it? And more than that, we are introducing the new species in it. There is population of like turtles in one Czech city, which has been released from cages by people. We have colony of like parrots here. Parrots is very unusual because parrots closer natural biotope for parrots is somewhere on the south in France, I think, or close by African continent. So it's completely new situation, and this kind of like new wilderness came, and cities starting to be like more and more similar kind of environment, because you can because the kind of animals and kind of plants and, let's say, kind of aesthetics which people like starting to be like spread over the whole planet, because all we are consuming similar films, similar kind of news, similar kind of merchandise we buy, similar kind of so the panmixy becomes a very typical feature of a recent time. So now promised sum up. It looks like from the side of Anthropocene story that we already changed the climate on the Earth several times somehow, by killing huge grazers or animals, which led to changing in land cover, by Neolithic revolution, now maybe by industrial revolution, because of contributing the sea greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, CO2, methane, and nitrogen and oxygen. That's most important. So it's not that new as we think. Second point, there is no like untouched nature existing out of human influence. So it looks like the new story is like there is no lost paradise observed by Columbus or anyone else. Like all human history, it's history of interconnection and interpenetrating, and we are all around the world like co-architectures of the nature. So human and nature destinies has been deeply interpenetrated during the whole Holocene, at least the Holocene. So maybe during the whole Anthropocene history, it's this new story, right? Maybe. Ultimate goal. So recent situation. Okay, recent situation is just another ultimate consequence. I mean, climate change. Consequence of running for all proximate goals. I'm pretty sure that industrial revolution and people will observe, I don't know, many times of usage of steam engine was really not involved or not intended to cause the climate change or something, but they did finally. All right. So, and we definitely don't want to contribute to climate change when we fly to Norway. Fortunately not. Okay. We don't want to do that, but we do. Okay, so ultimate goals always emerge from our proximate intentions. But, and that's the point, could we change them? I mean, the ultimate goals intentionally now. I'm afraid, you know, always when people want to change some like too big systems or something, change something in nature, it very often led to something that happened. I don't know. Most trivial example is foxes in Australia. We want to just kill overpopulated rabbits, and foxes obviously killed 2/3 of all species of animals there because it was like easy to catch them. And so, a climate system. Well, compare with climate system, which is partly chaotic system, and it's very complicated. Or economic system is just a really easy game. It's nothing. That's just a piece of cake. You know, climate, it's a really complicated system. So what we really should do? Should we start our mitigation policy and politics? I don't know. Some of my friends from Centrum of Theoretical Studies in Charles University thought, okay, we definitely change the climate somehow, but we can do nothing with it. My answer is, I don't know. In one way, it is almost sure that we cause recent climate change. It's almost sure that it will be a really difficult game in the very near future. But on the other hand, do we know enough about it? I remember that no, okay, I don't remember, I read it, that in the 60s, I think it was in the 60s, scientists has been really, that they believe that the next ice age will come very soon. There was a few very cold winters in a row, and they really believe, they was really convinced that the ice age is here in a few years, and nothing really happened. I just want to say that it's really difficult to combine those two goals somehow, right? Okay, so now, if I would have another 1.5 hours, I could provide this second part of this story, like reflection of Anthropocene from the humanities, but I shorted it on 1/10, and I turned 2 or 3 notes, and after that I wrote it. After that I wrap it all, and that's it. Those few notes came from this lady, Hanna Librová, who is professor of sociology and environmental humanities here in Czech Republic, and I'm her student, obviously. And she, this is not just her thought. She somehow interconnected the Anthropocene, or no, let me rephrase it. It's a product of Anthropocene in the humanities, or in our attitude to the nature in terms of conservation of nature or environmental effort or something. As those three features, what she really criticized because she really don't like it. And those are, first, the race of eco-pragmatists, or sometimes they call it eco-environmentalists, or post-environmentalists, or most commonly eco-modernists or eco-modernism, which is, let's say, a very pragmatic attitude, saying, you will see, well, let's construct the nature by our own hands. It's best we can do now because Earth is already overpopulated, I mentioned later. Second, she criticized even the word environment, and in Czech it sounds like it's more evident. in Czech language, it is more connected with the humans. Like it looks like environment is only environment for the humans. So already when we speak about it in this way, already when we use this word, we somehow determined and somehow set up our mind in a certain way. Third, the subject of criticism is ecosystem services. Even the concept of services became from economy, so basically from the human world. This understanding, despite of like first intention, this way of thinking about nature as about service. That's why now is moving to the contribution of nature to human well-being or something. It moved somehow, but this thinking about nature as about services, it's very, very anthropogenic somehow. But let me just say a few, maybe 3 notes from point of, let's say, post-environmentalist point of view, or those new eco-modernist point of view, to show you how we moved in the thinking and about environment. That's what I wanted to share with you. It's, let's say, from the last 15 to 20 years, maybe 30, somehow, doesn't matter, in the environmental philosophy. Just 3 others. Michael Pollan, who speak about second nature. Maybe you know very famous book of back to track. Michael Pollan with his second nature. He thought, it's a very typical anthropogenic, that human nature dichotomy is dead. There is no more this dichotomy. This metaphor of like divine nature allows us just 2 roles. We can be worshipping admirers of nature or breakers, but nothing else, he thought. Thoreau and Muir, those 2 are, they are giants of environmental ethics and environmental philosophy in America. Thoreau and Muir taught us to worship nature, okay, well, but didn't tell us how to live with it. So human intervention is often the only chance this species to survive now in the world overpopulated by men, obviously. So desired attitude to the nature is not independent nature ethics, but garden ethics. What it means, those eco-pragmatists, are still like more and more denying this imagination of, let's say, nature of something was self-sufficient, or what is what has not self-esteem, I can't say esteem, but it's like, okay, authentic. That's just authentic. Eco-pragmatic turn means like deviation from feeling-based attitude of like old environmentalists. Those 2 guys who wrote a very important paper called Death of Environmentalism in 2004, just conclude that Earth is irreversible change. Conservationist effort to save species is simply retarded. It's old-fashioned and it's inevitably useless. We can rely on restoration forces of nature. We really need to do something, because nature is already like too, let's say, pressed out, and it's not strong enough to restore all what we need for our lives. Breakthrough Institute is a very typical representative of it. Third author I wanted to remind is Emma Morris with her very interesting book, Rambunctious Garden. She thought that it doesn't make any sense to run to unspoiled nature anymore, because it no longer exists. It's time to take the role of stewards and create, or maybe manufacture, the compromise between wild and synthetic human and controlled nature. She advocated something like assisted migration. What it means? Natural environment disappears really quickly. So move species endangered by climate change, for example, anywhere we want, it's simply irrelevant. Otherwise they die, right? But the most extreme, let's say, most extreme statement from her book, in my opinion, is that she thought, is there any reason to think that the natural ecosystem is somehow better than one constructed by humans? That's Anthropocene move. In my opinion, my optics, that's Anthropocene moves. Doesn't matter who decide, who can decide, but what's the difference? What's, you know, where we can say that natural environment is somehow better than one constructed by our heads. So okay, Libera concludes that eco-pragmatists break the ancient anthropological principle of being in awe of nature and the cultural imperative of love to the nature somehow. Okay, there would be a few other nice authors, but I have to jump through over them. Maybe I can just advise you one interesting work of those two authors who sum up something what they say mature and immature defense of ego in terms of environmental problems, especially climate change. They told that there are like mature reactions, means you accept it as it is and you do the best you can in terms of your personal possibilities to fight climate change or to deal with it somehow. But most of people do something about they call immature reaction or defense, which leads to cognitive dissonance, what Tim likes me to. And those are, for example, those like denial, environmental problems don't exist, simple. Suppression, okay, displacement of inconvenient information or moving attention to something else. Trivialization, subject is accepting the problem but underestimates its importance or emphasizes unsolvable problems. Like, okay, scientists are often wrong, we will see. I'll do something similar just a few minutes ago. There were always problems, but humans always found solutions, very like right-wing attitude, okay? Or intellectualization, that's very typical for natural scientists. They dissociate of sensual, emotional, or value dimension of knowledge somehow. It's an attempt to take up the emotional distance through an abstraction, like model interpretation, for example, naturalization of terrifying findings in statistic models. That's typical. You experience something what you feel like really terrible, but if you put it in like wider frame of time, of space, it doesn't look that bad. Okay, it's just for example, it's just period of population growth of some particular species. It's a very dangerous thing. Postponement. Okay, so I accept problem, but postpone it to the future. Okay, it's not my business already. I'm 80. I'm 80, so my kids will deal with it somehow. Okay. Alternative or substitute strategy or replacement, we call it some. I'm feeling guilty, but trying to moderate it without dramatic change in behavioral patterns like recycling or saving energy or saving water. It's important, but sometimes it's like paying. I don't know how is it in English. If you pay, in the church, if you want to pay for your sin, you give just a very little sacrifice yourself in just a little way. Okay, I'm fine now. Very typical for academics. Sorry. Amusing activity, adrenaline, sports, shopping, and so amusing. Projection. My ego feels endangered and fighting back. It is a nature's revenge for our sins, one possible, or aggression. Okay, rage against, typical here, rage against environmental activists who bring inconvenient information and jeopardize our freedom. Okay, I just mentioned the last one, which is rationalization, which I consider very, very dangerous for us. Rationalization adds to explain unacceptable situation to us in, transfer it in something bearable, like Americans have a much higher environmental footprint than we have, okay? Or Czech Republic is too smart to change anything. We are just in 10 millions. 10 millions. Nation is nothing. So Americans and Chinese have, okay? So all this stuff, that's something what is very popular now here in Czech Republic. That's not popular. It's actually accepted psychological disease or problem called environmental grief. Environmental grief is defined like sometimes really deep depression coming with disappearing the nature surroundings you, like disappearing with the nature environment which somehow brings you or somehow means like a home for you, which when you feel really really bad, when you can see like the nature surrounds you disappearing really quickly and just is putting in vain somehow, and it leads really to something what it's already recognized as environmental grief. Was defined surprisingly by gerontologists, people who are dealing with people at the end of their life. Okay, it's more for vanishing of nature, as I already mentioned. Research of similarities between personal loss and loss of nature. Okay, I thought already. It's a result of personal sensitivity and internalization of the cultural value of nature. Edward Wilson wrote a wonderful book called I think it's a book called Biophilia. Yeah, his book. Biophilia, how he described it like we has been evolved in thousands and hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution, immersed in the natural environment. Now we used to live in those artificial caves for last few years. So some consequences are necessary. There are some ways how to deal with it, but if you want, I can provide some another material about it. It's quite similar. How to deal with environmental grief it's quite similar to dealing with the loss of your family members or something. It's very similar. Like you can accept it, then you are angry, then you're regaining somehow, then you have depression, and then you have no any other chance than accept it and try to do with it somehow. Okay, so instead of conclusion, finally, I'm basically ecologist, so I studied the history of environmental movement and environmental thinking and thinking in ecology for the last, let's say, 150 years. And I can recognize, let's say, three big eras or three big other paradigms which influence the conservation of nature and or attitude to nature a lot. Ecosystem era of evolution thinking, and I hope that Anthropocene, or I guess the Anthropocene is the recent one. Okay, all they are interconnected, influence each other, but somehow, just for better understanding, you can make this resolution. Well, in ecosystem era, there was a time where we distinguished between synthetic and the natural world. We know some ecosystem biologists describe like natural ecosystem natural close ecosystem and anthropogenic ecosystem like fields, for example, it could be understood as kind of ecosystem too. And they understood that there is something like synthetic, means brought by humans, and more like natural. Okay, so they still believe in something like untouched nature. You can find it like definition of what means like primary forest. Now we don't think that there is something like real primary forests, and that there are just some parts somewhere, but generally, okay. It was typical for conservation and restoration activity, and for like Aldo Leopold book, for example. Typical threat was disturbing of ecosystem connections or intoxication of food chain. That was what we care for the most. Intoxication of food chain was a huge issue, and disturbing ecosystem connections. We want to keep all the connections into ecosystem alive, or alter it with some other animals to keep ecosystem stable somehow, or alive. In the era of evolutionary thinking, evolutionary thinking, nature changed somehow in the floating mosaic. There was no more in ecosystem. Sorry, evolutionary thinking is different to ecosystem one. Ecosystem is somehow kind of like super system, like kind of like personality. It's a very holistic way of thinking. Not evolutionary one. The evolutionary one, it's more like opened. Everything can happen. Everything can change. It's completely different. Okay. So we don't know what history will bring to us. Human here was part of evolution, but somehow like genetically passive. We are just part of this game. That's all. We can't do nothing with it. Typical threat was disturbance of evolutionary processes somehow. Typically, making the huge area with the same kind of product like trees or crop or something, which disturb the evolutionary processes, because animal can't migrate through this terrible country. You can, okay, if you are eagle you can, but if you got that small beetle you can't really. So you can't migrate to another population of your species, and finally the whole population and the species disappeared finally. But recently in Anthropocene era, it's this time of like blurring and dissolving of boundaries of everything. It's time of fusion of the human and nature, synthetic and natural, human intelligence and intelligence of nature somehow, and artificial intelligence. So it's really a huge pan mixy. Even you can see, human and the artifacts now, including machines and leather and stuff, are now seen as a part of the nature as good as organic products. It's, our buildings are the same as, those, we call it castles or this buildings of beavers. As for us, the buildings are as natural as those nests for birds. And if we are part of nature, if culture is just the a form of nature, just in somehow another different way. So what we can consider the products of our hands as a part of nature somehow, or is like continents of litter in the oceans are already interpenetrated by those organisms, and nature is taking it in the game again. So there's different way of thinking about it. Nature, or any other kind of environment we were born in, seems to be our home, however terrible it could be. This is very typical, because when I was born, I already experienced the very end of typical, let's say, Carpathian, Balkanian way of management of the nature here. And I experienced this incomparable biodiversity richness of this era is incomparable with what is now. It's much worse. It's but when my kids have been born in this world, for them, this world, it's wonderful nature. That's tricky. It's very tricky. That's very how we can lose them very much. And when the future, okay, changing in element cycles, I begin with carbon. Deep impact of climate change on our populated planet. Maybe a race of machines. There's a big mystery for me. Why world accept machines that much? All of you is living in this, where is this bloody thing, in this electronic garbage and mobile phone. And they are not part, electronic devices, they are not part of our lives. They are our partners already. And it's a big mystery for me, but I can see this race of internet or what is it, technical boards as a very typical feature which will play a very important role. And now it's playing, by now we can see, you are in Malta, you are in Norway, maybe in Australia. Hello, okay. And we can be connected. It's a different world now. And as a last step, pandemic. Well, until now, it looks like the story of unstoppable success of the human race. And now one little organism, 1,000 times more than I don't know what, can stop us, can change something. And the question is if it will lead to some change in our Anthropocene story of successful species or not. What is COVID crisis would means for us now? At this point for our Anthropocene tribe, maybe. I've got some good hints from our colleagues. Thank you for that. First point, reaction. COVID crisis is somehow a reaction at our reckless desire for freedom from anything, from like to be independent from nature, from our responsibilities is a typical feature of environmental ethics. It will be nice another story. Freedom from things that pose limits to our development in general. Freedom from we are free from freedom somehow. So a rise of human led us to feel more secure in the type of environment that we created. Our economic make us very secure. Our social interactions may our science technology. That will solve. We feel like so. All problems just waiting for pill for COVID, because we used to live in a world that science can solve everything, and so on and so on and so on. But this world, I don't know what it will lead to. Definitely, COVID has shocked our realities and showed how vulnerable our security is, what I mentioned, where and how much our definition of well-being depended on the security. So one could ask whether we were really free of it's sort of American kind of freedom somehow. So COVID-19 provided us with a fast-forward experience of what facing an environmental desire, like disaster, like climate change, or what those things would really means. If you want, you can play wonderful, nice, very like quiet song of Nick movie. Thank you for tips, Paul. Call in the Anthropocene. So maybe for the lunch. Okay, each crisis by definition means opportunity to in Carl Gustav Jung's interpretation. He was a psychologist and he observed or bring us the resolution crisis to be really on the bottom as always the chance to change something. I just scratch it in a few minutes. So take it or leave it. But maybe the game could be played between those two or those opposites in the next years. On one hand, maybe we will face deep economic crisis, but there is also the right chance to find new ways in the economy. Maybe we'll be experiencing the strengthening of nationalism, but maybe, and it's in my opinion is necessary, the further cooperation with virus, which sometimes is in touch with all of us. On one way, it can lead to isolation sometimes, closing the borders, or maybe to clever traveling of everything, not just people. Maybe it postpone environmental politics, like in Czech Republic, or Prime Minister, what was Prime Minister, somehow told that firstly we should really shut down the Green Deal with cars and with CO2 emissions limits in cars, because it could stop our car industry. Terrible stuff. Or it can accelerate environmental policies. It can rise. It can rise for populistic politics and alternative truths on one hand, or rise the responsibilities for politics based on excellent science, maybe. And the last one is strengthening of no future generation, which is feeling of like a recent youth, as I noticed already. Or on the other hand, it can involve young in ecological citizenship as a new situation of world citizens, what they are living in. So maybe it could look like that, but I believe that, or what I really like, as this wonderful piece from Shawshank Redemption film. I hope all of you know it, because the last thing I want to say is that finally, world is open structure somehow, and the history will bring always something different than we are able foreseen. So I think the best thing we can do is to stay with open mind and don't be afraid, because fear to kill everything. So thank you guys. If you survived till now, and if you get just maybe 2 or 3 thoughts from all this terrible show and so on. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate that you survived my terrible English. Sorry guys, I'm second older piece on department, and I started to learn English when I was 30. So that's the result of life. But anyway, thank you a lot. Thank you for your attention, and next program will continue after lunch. Enjoy your meal. Thanks.
Okay, wait. Enjoy our meals. There are some questions in the chat. So can you please address them?
Yep.
There's several of them. You need to scroll up the chat because people have been asking throughout your presentation. So maybe be very brief. You have like 5 minutes to maybe touch some of them. So maybe just comment, not answer.
Okay, I just answer it. I don't write it there. Where was it? Neo-Malthusian viewpoint. Yes, I agree. I just maybe you noticed that I mentioned it's some particular group of people of let's say thinkers or philosophers who reduce somehow all recent environmental problems to population growth. The thought behind is that the most of technologies we are using now, it's already known for thousands and thousands of years. But if you use them in a small group of people, that you can't destroy too much. But if you have too much people who needs too much sources and who can improve technologies, obviously, too. it finally leads to a recent situation. So that's why they think that overpopulation is the most important like forcing or driver. I personally believe that it's a synergy of more like coincidental phenomena, like okay, population growth, technological growth, organization of society, healthcare, and so on and so on. So, but they support each other somehow. Yeah, that's. People have nature. It is important to acknowledge the heterogeneity of local participants. Yep, could be. I just most of I'm direction on like noble, savage, and tribal indigenous people harming nature. All what I want to say was that indigenous people has been like changing the environment too. And if you provide most of indigenous cultures with Western tools, results are quite evident. Okay, so it was thought behind it. It was wonderful. Maybe I couldn't advise it, but it is a wonderful film. It's a documentary film actually about a group of Berlin and like neo hippies called Fuck for Forest, and they make money by doing porn films to save some part of Amazonia. It is great fun until the end. It's freezing. I mean, in my opinion, it's a very good film because you really don't accept the end. It's not a happy end, actually. I really can recommend it somehow in touch with this. I don't know. That's too much, guys.
Okay, so
we did it a different way. I write commentaries into the chat, and now Jirka just make a few final notes, and we go to lunch, and I do it to the lunch. Okay, but thanks for all commentaries. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Tomáš, and we see everyone after the lunch break, which means that we're sitting here at 2. Okay, thank you very much.